doesn't get kicked, there's no bishop g4 pins and structural damage.
Yeah, I love that. And again, you gave up the bishop here, but remember, you want a pawn to get here. So removing that knight from d4 is probably White's top priority in this position. I'm sure Grischuk is thinking about it. But even though I got roasted, oh, no, he goes back to e2. I got roasted for calling out Grischuk's traditional time pressure that he welcomes earlier. Mark my words that as now we get to the more even matchups on paper and Grischuk is facing some maybe even higher level preparation, he doesn't want to get himself under time pressure, but he just might against Narayanan and maybe Iragaisi in the next round. So we'll have to watch out for that. All right. Speaking of things we got to watch out for, Robert, it's time to back up once again. The bird's eye view is ready. All 4 games are officially underway, but we have to choose a flavor. Wow, that Iragaisi game, I know we were just there, excuse me, but Iragaisi already with an advantage as black versus Maxime Vachier-Lagrave. But which other game do we want to pay off first?
I just want to make a few comments about the other 2 games, and we will go back to Maxime and Arjun. In the bottom left, we have Mitraba Guha with the white pieces against Diamante Dolite Cornet. And it says advantage black, but it's one of these positions that it gets messy quickly because it's not just a clear advantage where the moves are simple. It's look at white on the long diagonal. Black's pawn structure will be hanging pawns. So it's going to be one for the long haul. And in the bottom right, we're just getting started. So I do think we should go to Arjun and Maxime. It's a really critical matchup here for these 2 teams. And Danny, black's pawn structure, a bit compromised after the bishop exchange, double pawns in the center. But we tend to like these double pawns because it keeps that knight out. The knight on e3 dominated by the pawn 3 squares away.
Yep. Well, and now black can play a move like knight d4. Also, the b4 pawn is under fire. We should just point that out. Right now, white has to deal with that threat. Black also dominates the a file, which allows rook a3, which is poking at the d3 pawn, right? So white actually, despite black having the optically bad-looking double e pawns, white actually has the pawns that are the most targetable here, right? The d3 pawn and the b4 pawn are both a bit of issues. Will you play a move like queen b1, okay, or queen c2? That dynamically defends b4 because it pins the knight on c6. But I'm liking Arjun's chances, and again, given the time we see, it shows that he comes well prepared. The kid knows what he's doing, despite his inability to keep his shelf organized.
Well, he has his life organized. He's a 2,700 plus player. He signed a $1.5 million contract with Quantbox, or it's spread out over 5 years. But he can now bring his queen over to b7. He can organize his pieces by bringing his queen to a8, defending the knight on c6, keeping the back rank so the king feels safer, and then taking over the a file completely. I feel like Arjun is playing a wonderful game of chess thus far, and Maxime better be careful. He's quick in terms of time, but he better be quick on the board because he may find himself losing a pawn at some point. Black is putting on the pressure.
In the immediate sense, Arjun has to deal with a threat. White will play rook to c1 if you give Maxime one more move and that knight running into problems. But we're sure Arjun's going to find a square for the queen. And then the question will be, okay, and he does indeed with d7. Now the question will be, how does white defend b4? And as we pointed out, knight to d4 is an option, because normally you may not like that trade, but if that trade happens and that e3 knight doesn't have a happy square, it can't go forward because that pawn on e6 keeps it at bay. So anyway, interesting stuff. I admit I would probably lose this position for either side. It's that imbalance, but I can't wait to see how these 2 gentlemen play it much better than I would.
Well, I do think your idea from earlier, bishop d8, bishop b6 is also in the cards. Let's just try to improve this piece that's staring into pawns. It's not needed on the f6 square. So that's the one problematic piece. I think it can be improved. I like Arjun's position, but this remains a game. So I feel like we'll leave these 2 super GMs to it, and maybe we'll zoom out for a second because all 4 boards are in full swing.
Yeah, Diamante Dolite Cornet versus Mitraba Guha is one we haven't checked on. It's getting weird with a queen on h4, a knight on e4. What's going on? You tell me.
Yeah, it is pretty weird because there is a queen trade offered, and white, instead of trading queens, brought this rook to d1, saying, please take me. This is a good instructive lesson that you trade on your own terms. And if black takes this queen on h4, that welcomes this knight out to h4 with tempo against this bishop. And if you say, let's just trade pieces, you're not trading. You're, in fact, losing a piece on the spot. The knight takes this bishop. The other one's under attack. The knight on d2 is loose as well. White just wins. So let's say you don't trade queens on h4. Well, what's the idea? You're just going after these central pawns. Hanging pawns are probably the most difficult pawn structure to deal with, Danny. Maybe that's overstating the case, but I've always felt that way, even at my grandmaster level.
Yeah, I was just about to ask you, why does the computer prefer black here? Because everything you said, even at my international master level, lower than you, I'm like, everything about this tells me white's about to be better. The pieces are going to be traded, which means those pawns, which are really a middle game advantage. In order to use a hanging pawn advantage, everyone, you want pieces. You want to have a reason to use that space. If black could play moves, queen d7 or queen c7 and put a couple rooks behind the pawns, you might have some big pressure. But I feel like with the pieces getting traded, white has an advantage here. So I don't quite understand.
Well, it's what you just said. Pieces getting traded. I think black and the last one should put the pawn f6. I know Ben Feingold says never play f6, but a move ago, if we can bring up the analysis board.
Yeah,
H6,
let's do that.
I get the idea. You're just trying to create space for your king, but f6 shuts down the queen trade, shuts down the bishop all at once. And if you ever take this knight on e4, well, in comes the rook, and the queen is in danger. So I feel like keeping the piece on the board was advantageous for black. You just have the activity and the bishop pair. But now that h6 was played, I think you could swap queens. And after the rook takes, maybe take this knight on e4, because if the bishop takes on e4 here, those hanging pawns, they're not going to be lost. But I can bring my knight back first, get out of here. You go back. I bring my bishop here, and like it's every which way you're being threatened. And I just feel like it's uncomfortable for black, even though the eval bar says you're fine, it's about equal. I think it's just an easier position to play for white, who's actually targeting the black pawns.
Yeah, very, very well said. And the instructive points remain for chat that when you have a hanging pawn structure, keeping the pieces on the board has to be the top priority. Otherwise, you don't really have a way to justify those pawns being loose. F6, as awkward as that was, the moment you suggested, I'm like, okay, that's the grandmaster move. And, you know, I'm not a grandmaster. It took Ben Feingold a long time to become a grandmaster. Maybe that's why we struggle with F-pawns.
Well, I don't know about that, Danny. You're a great chess
player. Just
looking
for ways to get Ben involved in the show, looking to roast him. Hi, Ben.
I know, but I'm not going to let you roast yourself. I told you the self-deprecation, that can't happen. I'm going to have to be the one roasting you. And it's
therapy,
just not that time.
Therapy. Okay, therapy. You're right. Okay, therapy. Anyway, all right, but no, seriously, F6 is a really strong move. It also had that purpose, as you said, making that bishop on B2 kind of stare at granite. It's a really instructive idea. I love it. And now black may be regretting it very soon. Black may not lose the endgame, but the pieces being traded surely favors white. Those pawns only get weaker with every miner that leaves the board. So, all right. Every miner piece gone, it makes those pawns harder to play with. All right, let's back up. What do we got? We got more chess, more games to look at. Only one board that we haven't checked in on. Do we go pay off Savitha versus Boyer? See what's going on?
I'm just going to note that in top left, Maxime Vachier-Lagrave has lost the b4 pawn. So Arjun Erigaisi in the driver's seat. But in the bottom right, we just saw that Boyer stole the pawn on b2. So let's go into that one because Boyer, he is now up a pawn, at least temporarily. He's also up 3+ minutes. He is playing lightning quick chess. And, well, if the best that white can do is try to take this pawn on c6, that's not going to get it done. The bishop on b6 is a monster. The knight on b3 is not a very good piece. It's not the steed, it's a donkey. And I like Boyer's chances in this one.
Agreed. And the healthy pawn is already hard to argue with. What do you play here? If you take on c6 twice, black can regain the pawn by putting a rook on c8, and you win the c2 pawn right back. I assume that's the move. Yeah. But if you're not going to take your pawn back now, you may never have another chance because on the next. Oh, by the way, a trade on c6 did occur, and then c4. By Savitha. Interesting. Okay.
Wow, that's a really smart move. I wasn't even looking in that direction. But she's trying to shut down this bishop and disconnect the bishop from the A pawn. And that's actually a really nice try by her. I think queen takes c6 was easily winning for black after rook c8 and getting active. So c4 is a wonderful move by her. She's still worse, but she can play rook to b1 now. c5 is coming. c6 is loose. a7 may be a target. Good move.
I love it. And if c5 comes, even if you don't win the c6 pawn right away, much better chances. You can kick the queen from b2 and relocate that knight at some point. So this is a way to play a position down a pawn is to make sure that your opponent's pawns can't really use their advantage. They can't get going. Oh, and by the way, so black plays c5, but the compromise of that is now you've made your bishop kind of a dull boy over there on b6. And I really like what you said. I think Savitha found the best way to keep the fight alive here with c4.
And if she could bring her knight to d5, she might just be better, even though she's down a pawn. So this bishop is really just acting as a pawn. And the inherent limitation of a bishop, it only controls the color complex it's on. So I actually like the move knight a5, because if we get liquidation, I know I'm talking about bringing the knight to a good square, but just to step back a move and bring up the analysis board, that if knight a5 and you take it, Well, this should help White's chances. The second rook comes to A1. We're going to hit A7. We're going to hit C5. We're going to see liquidation, and that should help the chances to hold the game. But instead, she decided to bring the rook over. The queen went back to F6. And, well, what about this endgame, Danny? We could take on F6. Yeah. Black saying, my double isolated pawn's not a big deal. I have an outside passer, and it's an extra pawn.
I think you highlighted it well. If only the knight could move diagonally and through its own pawn, right? If that knight lands on D5, completely different evaluation of this position, but a long way to get there. And what can Black do in the meantime? And if I was to give one other evaluation about this this matchup from 30,000 feet, I would say the only other problem I've noticed with Savitha throughout the day is she's been consistently down on time, right? And that's hard. Obviously, she's been playing super strong players, but looking at that clock before we leave it, Black doubles White's time on the clock, and that may end up being her undoing.
I'm with you. I mean, the double pawns aren't that big of a deal. Look at Boyer going to the open file, stopping knight e4, and at some moment, once this bishop moves, the a pawn will be released. But that's far away because the rook is on the b file. It's creating some pressure. So she has chances, but the clock is not doing her any favors. So I'm with you. We can hop around to another game just because this one will go for a bit with the end game. Oh. What catches your eye?
We got to go back to the Iragaisi game. He's continuing to flex a small advantage against MVL, but it's a small advantage that I think could become a bigger one in a hurry. He's up a pawn on b5, and now he's using it, I think, wisely, which is more of a, let me just forget about that guy and put pressure on White's pieces, prevent Maxime from improving his king side. Look at this. He's tactically holding on to the pawn.
Oh, White 94! 94! I'm going to show that. Give me that pawn. Oh, have fun with it. Because knight d4 says, please, take my free knight. It's free. Go for it. But after queen takes f2 check, the king is just hunted down. The king would have to go over to a square like h2. You take this pawn. Yeah. The king comes back. And I don't know where the checkmate is, but I'm guessing it's somewhere here.
It's got to be there. E5 maybe, but then there's queen c4 check. I actually don't know. What?
Maybe just back. Queen here. Simple chess.
Okay.
You can't protect
queen f6. Simple chess. I was grimacing when you first started showing this line because just shaking my head for my boy Maxime. This is super tough, and he is down a little bit on the clock. So, okay, he has already played queen b3, rook a5, but his chances to hold this are based on whether Iragaisi can coordinate the pieces and just use the extra pawn. And I don't know how many tricks Maxime can come up with before that happens.
Wow, this is just a clean extra pawn, especially if you play b4. Now it's protected by all your minor pieces. The rook can slap to a3 to go after this knight on e3. That's been the problematic piece. We mentioned it a while back. This knight on e3 dominated by this pawn on e6. It never got anywhere, and all it's doing is blockading the bishop. That's an important task, but I think that you can dislodge it with b4 and rook a3.
Yeah, I feel you, dog. I feel you. I feel your dog. I feel your dog. I feel your dog. Is that a thing people still say?
I feel like you just aged yourself a lot.
I just aged myself. Well, I do. I'm picking up what you're putting down.
Yep. What sandwich do you want me to finish?
Okay, hold on. D6 is traded for F2. I don't know that that's a simplification Maxime wants. Arjun. Go ahead.
I feel like there have to be so many tactics here, but Arjun is doing the right thing. He could take on f2 with check and then move his queen. He has that as an option, but he probably has a game-ending tactic. We see it on the... Oh! He doesn't even take f2. He takes it with the h2 square. It's mate.
Rook takes c5 is met by rook a1 check, and it's Rover.
He's so good.
He
just took away the escape square.
Dude, this is crazy. And Maxime is shaking his head. Seriously, his tactics are just bananas. He wins games. I mean, you could have played a number of moves there as Black, but he pauses. His sense of danger, right? That's one thing that he has. He spots those tactics because I feel like he has a sense when there's a blunder that was made and always seems to capitalize.
Yeah, maybe he's like Austin Powers. His middle name is Danger. And he can just go rook takes f2, queen g3. This is just mate, right?
Oh, queen to g3. Please play queen to g3. No, not right away because the a2 rook hangs.
Right.
But
we take
rook
on
takes
f2.
f2.
That looks good, right?
It looks fun. Rook takes f2, rook takes c5, queen to g3. There is knight e1.
Oh, I didn't see that, honestly.
Okay, so maybe that's the problem.
Oh, he's out under a minute.
Yeah, Queen B1 was a resourceful move by Maxime. It's funny because we have the luxury of the eval bar, but Arjun doesn't have that, and so it's a little tricky.
Yeah, we were looking at Rook F2, and if Rook takes C5, Queen G3, I thought it was just leading to checkmate, but there is Knight E1, and maybe Black's still winning because you can bring this knight up into D4 and just go into the game. Oh, I blundered somehow. Oh, it's check, and it's E5 check. Okay, this is just getting wild. I can't see it like Arjun can. I'm just going to trust him.
Arjun only has 30 seconds, though, to a minute and a half from MVL. By the way, the other games in this round are also still going, but we're probably going to stick right here because this is a game with so much on the line with two of the biggest names playing in this matchup.
He gives away his rook because the C1 rook is loose, but rook C8 check, king H7. You can get this rook, but he's going for a mate. There's just got to be a checkmate over here because he is giving up a rook. Where is
Stone Cold Killer. Focused.
Wait, where's the checkmate, Danny? After knight takes F3, there's queen takes F2.
Wait, there's queen H2 mate if you take F2.
Oh, I missed mate in one. And MVL did too. Look at him. He's hiding his face like I did.
Duh. I don't know what he just said to himself, but gave himself a good slap in the cheek. And unfortunately, Arjun gets it done in style if you're a Blitz fan.
Just want to show the conclusion here that queen takes F2. There's queen H2 checkmate. Maybe that's the line that MVL missed like I did. And if you take this knight on F3 directly, you get checkmated by force. Queen takes pawn. Your king is in the corner. Keep pushing it back. And then there's two checkmates. Either queen H3 or queen G1 is mate. The bishop covers the square. And of course, queen G1 is the same mate. So Arjun Erigaisi,
Maxime is... He hasn't gotten up. Arjun gets up in a hurry. Maxime is already hitting that game review button. Let me see my game report. Where did this go wrong? And we'll leave him to analyzing as we back up. Alexander Grishuk and Narayanan look like they're getting closer to a draw, but Narayanan the only one with chances. So the chances for the Blitz not looking great right now, with Erigaisi having already taken down MBL, and Narayanan is the only one who can win this game, even though it is likely a draw.
Yeah, and Alexander Grishuk has played in the Bullet Chess Championship. He's a great bullet player in addition to his classical and rapid and blitz skills. So this one actually is quite easy for White. You just sit. You do nothing. You move your rook back and forth. There's not an easy way for Black to make progress except for G5, G4, except when you give up your G-pawn on the spot.
He was laughing. He's like, well, that's not going to do a lot for my winning chances. We'll take a draw.
Okay, well, that makes our lives easier, and the Blitz can be a bit happier. That game is a draw. 2 games remain. Danny, in the bottom right, it looks like Michal Boyer completely winning.
Savitha versus Boyer, a huge victory this would be for the Blitz. Remember, they were down a point coming into this round 3, so they need everything they can get. And right as we join, Boyer does get the job done, winning a piece on E2 after the move Bishop E1. Very, very nice. Savitha's time pressure, unfortunately, remains her Achilles heel.
It does, and just to quickly show that Black just infiltrated with the pieces. Rooks to the center, bishop kicking the knight away. The bishop slides up, helping the pawn go forward, and then the rooks come into the game, and it was a devastating win for Black. Pin, and then win. That's game over. So win for Boyer, win for the Blitz, and that leaves one game remaining here, Danny.
Yep.
And it's between Mitraba Guha and Diamante Dolite Cornet. This is a huge one, because if the Blitz somehow take this game with the Black pieces, they will be tied.
Yeah, this would be a reversal of the last round if Cornet can get the job done. Unfortunately, probably only White has winning chances in this rook ending, but time pressure does crazy things to people, so we'll see.
Yes, and playing for a result also does crazy things. If you're playing for a win, that can backfire, but here White is too stable. The pawn structure is nice and protected. One pawn island here where D5 is isolated. Here goes Mitraba Guha's rooks going after A7, and White's king. Even though the Black king is out on E6, you could check it backwards, and maybe the White king could play a part here.
I'm with you. I was just trying to imagine, is there any real winning chances here? Now, okay, if that king gets to E5, watch out. The rook can come to A6. And but that makes H6 weak. Yeah, so the rook can come to the 6th rank. You can't play rook D6 because the A7 pawn falls. So, by the way, why wasn't rook A6 just... No, F6, really I guess, for Black. It wasn't losing yet. F6 was possible.
But she walked in, and you see her go back in her chair. She blundered it. Is it checkmate? The king goes up to E4. It's almost checkmate here if you can get f4 to work.
Yeah, so